Hello, welcome back to Aetheral Space 13.54, The Hungry Throne. We are back. Hello. Who are you?
Hello. I'm Darnell, and I'm jumping right into this reading.
Whoa! It's too fast! There's air pressure!
Oh.
He disappeared.
I have to read.
Sorry.
People, no, you're good. People got, one of my friends was like, when do you stop yapping at the beginning of the Aether videos? And I was like, oh.
Never.
Never.
He's self-conscious about it now, but he doesn't realise that we are yapping already.
No, I'm reading. Oh, Beatrice Grace, you are a cunning one. He's not dead? Fino Oino. Is it Onio or Oino? I thought it was Onio. Yeah, there you go. Fino Onio stepped back into a clear section of the roof, blades of blood whipping through the air around him, creating a cyclone that would hopefully prevent Beatrice Grace from drawing close again. One hand was held over his open jugular, bone-white aether coursing through it as he continued to use his red rum. It was a tricky operation, and one he rather wouldn't be doing. Essentially, he was manually forcing his blood to flow as if his jugular was still present, creating a sort of invisible vein that prevented him from bleeding out. That's so clever, so he's not losing the blood, but he has to, concentrate to do it. It was a maneuver that required... I'm going to steal this, by the way, for my character.
No
it was
problem.
a maneuver that required constant focus.
You are of the serpent's kinds.
Ooh, don't even get me started. It was a
Don't get me started on the freaking serpents, bro.
It was a maneuver that required constant focus. If he misjudged his ability, even in the slightest, he would surely die. Even worse, it limited his options in taking on this opponent. So, what's his end game here? Can he, because his jugular's just gone. So, can he do this? Does he have to do this forever? Or is there, just until he can get to Panacea?
Well, probably until he can get medical treatment, yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine operating on someone whose, blood is flowing manually? It's like, we have to put you under... No, I have to concentrate or this will go away. A sort of, invisible vein. Blah, blah, blah. Moving around too much would break his concentration and risk the collapse of the invisible vein. Not an option. He couldn't swing ill humor properly with just one hand, and moving his hand away from his throat would risk the collapse of the invisible vein. Not an option. He couldn't activate his Absolutian Manchineal, because that would mean disabling his red rum, which would immediately collapse the invisible vein. Not an option. Not an option. Not an option. Not an option. It felt like the world had suddenly become made of prison bars, an incarcerated universe. What options did he have? Even retreating wasn't reliable right now. He couldn't move quickly in this state, and even if he could keep the blood cyclone following him while he withdrew, it would be destabilized by the movement. There was a chance that Beatrice would weave through and deal another grievous wound. This was the closest he'd ever come to death. He could feel it, a cold stranger on the threshold, running its fingers over his wound. He'd long imagined how a moment like this might feel. He'd expected fury. But right now, his heart was dancing. Fino Onio let ill humor slip away into his aether and grasped a katana of blood with his now free hand. A feral grin spread across his lips. Red eyes stared adoringly at an enemy he could not see. Ah, Beatrice Grace, he thought, his cheeks bloody. Kiss me again with that silent blade of yours. Only, a frown consumed his face once more. In the sky, in the distance, but quickly approaching, he could see it. The shape of something that wasn't meant to be here tonight. The light of something that wasn't meant to be here tonight. The first branch of the tree of might, Xandarain, surging towards the temple as if gravity held no dominion over him. Strands of weathered brown aether coursing around his body. It seemed this fight would be ending faster than expected. Fino observed the advent of a parchment star. What's a parchment star?
It's brown like a parchment.
Oh. Bruno stood in the empty throne room, Morgan standing behind him, glaring across the distance of 2 years. They were still far apart, always far apart, but Bruno felt he could almost see his face. He could almost see the face of Dragon Hadrian. There was an expression he made. A face Dragon made when he suddenly went from the observer to the observed, a flicker of panic, just like he just remembered that he existed. Bruno bet he was making that face now. "You're listening now, aren't you?" he said, voice low. "I mean it. I know you're not listening. You're probably thinking the best thing to do is turn off the broadcast. But you can't do it, can you?" Silence. "Because you know," Bruno continued, hands balled into fists, "you know that whatever I'm about to say is something you need to hear, right?" Silence. In the distance, a shallow explosion, not even enough to shake this tranquil place. Bruno took a deep breath, the past flowing into him with the air. 2 years ago, when we met, I didn't trust you. Hell, I didn't trust anyone except Serena. You know why. Caught, the said, all of it. It was like I couldn't bring myself to trust anyone else ever again. It would be like putting the dagger back in all by myself. That's how I thought. Morgennacht watched with a strange expression, something between pity and concentration. Ordinarily, Bruno wouldn't talk like this in front of someone like him, one step away from an enemy. But right now, right here, he didn't have a choice. His mouth had already started moving, after all. I thought you would leave, Bruno said, whispering at first, then raising his voice to make sure he could be heard. I was sure you would leave, like North, like I had sometimes thought of doing. I wasn't stupid. I knew Skipper's plan, whatever it was, wouldn't end happily. I know what the eyes of a dead man look like. I think you do, too. Serena didn't know. She knew what that looked like, but she didn't know that I'd thought about leaving. She's surprised right now. She's not saying anything because she thinks I need to talk, but she didn't know. She's only finding out now, 2 years later. Some brother I am. He chuckled. There was no humor in it, just a crumbling weariness. 2 years, he repeated, as if the words were alien upon his tongue. 2 years. It's funny. When I think about it, I've missed you for longer than I knew you. Do you think that's funny? Nothing, save for a distant scream crawling from down below. Back then, you have said something stupid. You always had to get a word in, even if it made you look like an asshole. I loved you for that. Oh, shit! Tan!
Hmm?
Tan.
What?
You're letting Bruno be too honest right now. Xander Rain better not burst in this room and kill him, I swear to God.
He gets a Dark Souls backstab.
What did you say?
He gets like a Dark Souls backstab.
Oh, Tan! Tan, I swear to God! Tan, if anything happens to him right now, I will find you! Nothing, save for a distant scream crawling from down below. Back then, you'd have said something stupid. Oh, sorry. Bruno looked down at his hand. His gloved, ruined, ravaged hand. He sighed. These days. Well, I don't know what you'd say these days. I don't know what you'd do. You won't let me find out, will you? That's why you're running away, isn't it? He looked up. Isn't it, Dragon? Dragon Hadrian sat frozen upon his throne. The chamber was empty. There were no listening devices in here. Even North was away. Right now, there was nothing in this room save for himself, Bruno's voice, and his own thoughts. But his thoughts were a tempest. Turn it off. Don't let yourself get distracted. You're nowhere close to the end yet. Don't drag them down with you. They'd hold you back. You don't need them. They're better off without you. You made a promise. You don't owe anyone anything. You need to keep going. Don't tell anyone. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let them change you. Don't let them take your hand. You can't. You're not allowed. Will you make this stick?
What's that? Fuck.
You better edit this. Fuck you. Make this stick for me. The only one allowed to decide what happens to you is you. Don't think for a second that you can escape that. Dragon Hadrian wanted to do so many things in that moment. He wanted to run. He wanted to stay. He wanted to stop listening. He wanted to speak. He wanted to go home. And he realized dimly that he had no idea where that was anymore. Forget about it. So in the end, he did nothing at all. He sat there, and he stayed there, and he didn't listen, but he heard. Morgennacht had left the room at some point, but Bruno barely even registered it. Right now, the entirety of his attention was focused on the ghost that was not before him, the absence of Dragon, and the absence that looked behind him, too. It's because of Skipper, isn't it? Bruno asked the emptiness. It did not answer. The only thing I can think of is Skipper, Bruno slowly said. You were the last one to see him alive. You were the last one to talk to him. At least during that battle at some point. While I wasn't there with you, something happened, didn't it? Something changed you, but I do think it was Skipper in the end. I think he asked you to do something, didn't he? Cold. He asked you to do something, Bruno affirmed to the air. And that's why you're here now doing this. Because you feel like you have to. But are you happy, Dragon? Silent. When I was with you, when we were all together, I was happy. I don't know if I understand what that feels like, but This awful feeling in my chest. This thing I've been feeling for the last 2 years, it went away. For a little while, at least. Those times were like my medicine. You were like my medicine. Empty. You feel it too, don't you? That awful feeling? The chamber did not answer him. The temple did not answer him. The world, the entire blackened, sodden world, it did not answer him. A sad smile crossed Bruno's lips. A smile that had never expected anything else. When you want it to stop, I guess I'll be waiting. He turned, took a deep breath, and began striding out of the chamber. There's nothing else you've left me, is there? The smile was gone. When Dragon emerged from the command room, White Cloak pooled taut around his form. Tyr Masterman was waiting for him. The third branch nodded respectfully to him, only to suddenly pause, a bemused expression rippling over his mustachios. Zero Branch, he said. Are you all right? Dragon looked at the older man. Of course I am, he replied. Everything is going according to plan. What reason would I have to hesitate? The old man was clearly growing senile. There was no reason to be concerned for Dragon. After all, his face was cold and expressionless. His face was cold and expressionless right now. As ever, his face was cold and expressionless. The only one who decided what happened to him was him. He'd make this stick. There was nothing else to worry about. Well, Tyr said, you're crying. Slowly. Deadly slowly. Dragon Hadrian turned his head to face the third branch. A plastic smile spread across his lips. Something that had been crawling up was stuffed back down. Tears of joy, my friend, Dragon said. The operation has gone well. We grow closer to our goal with each passing second. My heart dances with celebration. Yours should too. Is it so strange for me to show my exultation? He went to pass Tyr, but the man spoke up one last time. It's as you say, the third branch nodded. The operation has gone well. Only... Dragon stopped. Only? The boy, first branch Rain. He's been spotted heading through the city. It seems he's on his way to the temple. I assume he means to fight as well. Was this on your command? Dragon looked back at the old man. His face was cold and expressionless. Tyr paled at what he saw, taking a fearful step back. I see, Dragon said pleasantly. Yes, that was on my command. There was nothing else left for him. Tan?
Yeah?
I swear to God, if you have happened what I'm afraid might happen here, Tan,
yeah?
I'm telling you, I will come for you, alright? There won't be any hiding, alright? The ocean, I will cross it. I swear to God. Do you want to read this next bit?
Well, you're almost done. And I got a sore throat.
I'm gonna kill you.
What do you mean?
The Graces, Marcus, Beatrice, and Amelia, lay splayed out on the roof, a massive crater forming their bed. Marcus had used his body to shield the two younger members of his family, and his sliced-open back was bleeding heavily. The bullets he'd fired at their attacker continued to travel through the air, agonizingly slow, crawling through space like flying snails. Sander Rain slapped them out of the air with a swing of his halberd. The fourth branch, Fino Onio, nodded to the first as he strode across the rooftop. I didn't know you were meant to be here, the Skirn said. After seeing the Tree of Might fight so valiantly, Xander replied, I couldn't just sit and wait at home. You should continue treating that injury. Ordinarily, Fino would have been insulted enough by this to seek recompense, but it seemed his near-death experience had brought with it the shadow of humility. He just nodded again, hand hovering over his open jugular. They'd have to get that properly repaired before long, but for now red rum would suffice. If Fino lost consciousness, Xander supposed he could take over too. Manipulating the flow of something as predictable as blood wasn't a big deal for him. I forgot that's what his ability is like flows.
Yeah,
right?
so he could probably, like, imitate red rum to some degree.
Cool. Well, red rum's the armament, right? I thought his
No,
ability was called...
Humor is the chainsaw.
The armament, that's right, and red rum's the ability. Blood, wind, bullets. There was a flow to all of them. A path they took and a speed they took it at. What about the golden path? Can he control the flow of that?
That's the concept.
And yet, wouldn't be outside the scope of things we've seen before. DNA strings.
Yeah, but that's moving. That's not. You can't take that as standard.
The nameless ability to manipulate both of those factors gave Xander power over a great many things. He let the air hold his halberd for him as he stepped forward, looking down at the defeated Graces. 3? He mused, frowning. Is this all they sent, Fino? The 4th branch shook his head. There are 2 more below decks. Morgan Noct and a bounty hunter called the Ventriloquist. One of Hadrian's old friends. Some mercenaries, too. Lord Hadrian! Forgive me, Fino said in monotone. The bloodlust. Xander sighed. I'll go down and pursue the pair of them in a second, I guess. After I finish off these ones. Losing access to the Grace family will be a good blow against a toy Muzazi. Don't you think? Fino stared at him. I would think the swing of a sword is the only blow we should be concerned with. Xander snatched his halberd out of the air, holding it high over the unconscious Graces. Farewell. Die and become the foundation of this nation. Reapers do! Take their metal strips, bind the mouth, hands, and feet of the 1st branch of the Tree of Might, Xander Rain. Xander's eyes widened in alarm. Before he could do anything with that alarm, however, he found a thick strip of metal flying through the air and snapping into place against his mouth, gagging him. A second later, another strip bound his wrists. A second after that, his legs were bound tight. It was a wonder he didn't fall over. The voice sounded out again. Metal strips, do the same to Fino Onio, 4th branch of the Tree of Might, but leave him one hand free to treat his injury with his Aether ability. Fino went to jump back, but the strips were too fast. Within mere moments he was bound as well, falling backwards onto the surface of the roof. Xander knew this. It had been part of the research they'd done before going into this Dawn contest. He looked up, eyes still furious. All word. Yo! Do you think she will achieve peace and joy for all mankind? The temple was passing beneath a great bridge, and atop that bridge he could see a figure. A young woman who looked like she belonged nowhere near a battlefield. Her blue polka dot dress and red slippers a stark contrast to the cool gleam in her eye. Her arms were crossed and her feet planted apart as she regarded them from up on high.
Who the hell do you think we are?
For real? Of course her arms were crossed. This woman had no need for her hands. She could defeat nearly anyone with just the sound of her voice. Ooh, Skipper could have defeated her with the tongue move. I'm just saying.
They would have a yap off.
Dorothy Iro, one of the 3 special officers closest to the level of the former contenders. She smiled. Let's stop all this fighting. Okay? Tanhoney.
Yeah, I'm Tanhoney.
Tanhoney.
Yes.
Motherfucker.
What do you mean?
I need you to fix this right now. Bruno's heartbroken. He's heartbroken. Fix this right now!
This is the burden of being alive, I'm afraid.
Oh my god. I'm gonna reach through the... Do you hear him laughing? He thinks this is funny, viewers! I'm gonna kill you. Then what are you gonna do
What if
about
you
it?
found out that God was real and he's the Joker?
You know what? That's what you are. You're the Joker. Ooh.
The final church reaches enlightenment and they just hear
I'm killing you. Questions. Ruroom 48 asks, were there any notable armaments in Pierrot's collection on the Unite Regent that are now destroyed?
Well, he didn't get many of them out of there, to be honest, so,
Were there any that were notable?
On his ship, he probably, on a ship where he's not expecting to run as much trouble, he would not keep, real valuable ones, to be honest.
Okay.
So, he had some fodder with him.
Lan asks, why do so many people copy Quantum King?
Because
Especially considering Damon's reputation.
It's a good power, good ability. It's the just general push and pull. You can tweak it in a number of ways to make it fit your needs. And even if it's Damon's reputation, you're like, well, I've got the power of a Supreme. In one sense, look at me. Look at my big dick.
Interesting. Who was the birthday bandito that Cadman fought? Asks Quaker.
The birthday bandito, he had an ability sort of like appointments. In that, no, it wasn't about the points. I did think about this, but
no. I remember you talking about it. He's stronger on his birthday, but then he has another ability that makes his birthday whatever.
Yes, that was it.
Ruroom asks, "Is the sixth dead the first dead that wasn't male?"
Yes.
Interesting. Ruroom asks, "How common is it for Lilith worlds to have any Aether knowledge, since they were usually cut off during the 1,000 Revs when Aether came to be?"
It's fairly rare. And if they have it, it's not into the same terminology in, philosophy.
Lan asks,
how we saw with Hexgate was God's Blood and Guardian Entities, the word Aether was not a part of it.
Right, and they only knew how to use it through
They
the Guardian Entity.
yeah, so they did it backwards. Basically, they came up with a really complicated technique, and then anyone who wanted to know more had to reverse engineer the basics from that.
But how did they unlock their Aether to begin with? Because my understanding was they all went to a ship and just got one shoved in them.
Well, they had the capacity for Aether, the original people, and then they have just because they don't know it as Aether, they know the power as God's blood. They have the knowledge of it from that point, and then they can get it. They get like the mental programming shoved into them by the ship for specific guard entities.
Lan asks, "Are awakenings always more powerful than the pre-awakened person?"
Not necessarily.
Really? Even though they're flooded with Aether?
Well, it's like if you lose all your intelligence, you might have more capacity and more ability to do stuff, but you're not going to use it properly.
Right.
Like if you have a really
like an
complicated
extremely
ability,
technical, high-skill Aether user, and then you awaken, it's not going to be much.
yeah, there's a coin flip on how well you'll still be using that after that point, depending mainly on like how long you've had your Aether and how intensely you've used it, how much of your consciousness is sort of soaked into it. Because if there's lots of gaps in there, then it's going to be basically brain dead.
The Jamie from fucking Arc 9, he wasn't playing good. Oh, it wasn't Jamie. Who was it? The card guy? Pablo.
Yeah.
He wasn't making good card plays, I imagine.
No, he was basically just throwing ants at Ruth.
Alright. One final question.
Okay.
Lan asks, how do you stay interested in writing AS for such a long time?
I change it up frequently in terms of what's going on when I start to get bored.
Alright, well thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye!
Bye!